Teresa, 45.
Rebecca, 44.
Lisa, 41.
Kata, 38.
Maggie, 45.
Molly, 38.
Josie, 60.
Katie, 44.
Claire, 34.
Samantha, 40.
Marcia, 66.
Welcome to Interwoven's spring and summer season of 2022. This podcast is dedicated to women taking control of middle life's narrative through story and conversation. Each episode will bring you inspiration, information, and community relevant to middle life. This episode features a conversation between Josie and Katie as they discuss self-discovery, career, community, supporting each other, and chosen family. Remember to hit subscribe so you can keep coming back, and to visit our website to sign up for our newsletter as well as to access more resources. Find us at interwoven.com. That's INTERWOVXN.com.
So I was just thinking recently about when I saw you. I didn't meet you yet. Oh, I think I did meet you later that day. I had just started my job at MyEd, straight out of grad school. I went to the scholarship awards at MyEd.
Oh, no.
And your mother was sitting right in front of me, and she just kept like bouncing in her chair and clapping. And she was like, had unbridled enthusiasm and pride. And I realized that it was you that she was clapping for, and because you kept looking at her and kind of raising your eyebrows, then later on she ran up and hugged you when you got your scholarship award. Yeah, I think I congratulated you and met both you and your mom that day.
That would have been, I just did the math, like 98.
98. That was my first
25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was born in 51. She'd be between us right now in age. You
were very graceful in the way that you handled that level of enthusiasm that I think if that had been me, I kind of would have been like, you know.
I as you bring that up, well, and I always forget about it.
Uh-huh.
Like, it's not necessarily an actively repressed memory, but I kind of giggle because I can immediately go back to that space in the dark auditorium.
Yeah.
And the carpet was rippled.
Yeah.
And there were maybe like 12 people. It was not a large audience at all in my mind.
No, it was fairly small.
And I do remember my mom, and she still is that way. She is still like,
a cheerleader.
Yeah. Because everything I do is like unicorn sparkle. And I'm always sort of like, no, it's not, Mom. You think the whole world is filled with people like me and hard workers, and I love your praise.
Yeah. I was 38 at the time.
And I would have been like 21, 22.
Yeah.
So I would have had 3 years in school, and then I immediately graduated and started working there.
Right.
And then we became friends.
We became colleagues.
Yeah.
I remember when you had become an admissions counselor and we're colleagues, that I went through a terrible breakup where my heart was just broken. And you came by, and again, I said
it would be okay.
Yeah, you gave me this beautiful card that you had made with the raised letters saying, "You will be okay." And I actually still have that. It's down on the shelf downstairs.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't really think I was going to be okay. I mean, it was a really tough, it's like I thought I had found my forever person, and then my hopes were dashed. But I was broken up with a week before my 40th birthday, so it was really a bad time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that card from you was one of those things that just was like, yeah, I will be okay.
Well, I think it's funny that the first time we met, my mom was there, and we have the relationship that we have, and it is not, I don't think, an ideal one of there any sort of stereotypical, this is how we paint a picture and illustrate our family, because knowing that I had known you, I don't know if I truly know how much pain you were in or how decimated you were, but you see a person who's hurt, and you see a person who you love. And I use the word very freely, but very intentionally. That's kind of what family becomes.
Right.
This person who is in your world. And maybe that's kind of what has become my working definition of family, is who is in this world that you occupy. And look at you now. You have a wonderful wife, this wonderful house. Yeah. There were funny bumping points along the way. And I'm so glad that I gave that to you, but I gave it so freely and without any expectation. Yeah. But to think that I was able to give that gesture to you and that it meant what it did.
Yeah.
And then it's like, that's when you hooked yourself in me. And then that's when we continue to fly together.
I mean, even then, as so often happens with friendships, like I feel like I didn't see you for a long time when you went to grad school, even though you were just down the road, and I was still at Myatt, and you had gone to UWM.
But then you followed me.
Then I followed you. Maybe you followed me.
Maybe,
because since I graduated from you,
So
I don't know. We just sort of revolved around each other. I feel like.
Yeah. So I left Myatt, and working there, we didn't know what we were doing. I felt like we were sort of spinning circles, and I still question that in my life. Like, am I actually moving forward, or am I going back and forth? But I wanted to move forward, and I just wanted to just be active. I wanted to make art. Yeah. And so grad school became a protective bubble where it puts a timeout on the rest of the world. Lets you just make. So I was working with you as a colleague then. And after graduation's left, I moved to New York City.
That's right.
And I was going to be an artist. And I was this like poster child of someone who graduates from art school and goes to New York. The big city. And I had a free place to live. And it was exchanged for working for an artist. I still have a drawing in one of my sketchbooks on graph paper because it was like 10 feet by 12 feet, but it was high. It was lofted ceiling. So I was like, I can just figure out how to make things work.
Could build a sleeping loft and have your studio underneath.
And then on my little desk, I can also have a 2-pot boiler for cooking. And then under the desk, I can stack my microwave with my toaster. Like, it was all compartmentalized like an artwork. And I got there, and the artist affectionately referred to it as the pigeon coop. And that's because it was literally a pigeon coop hours before I moved in. Like, there was still poop on the floor, and the windows were boarded up. I just remember crying, thinking, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And Sandy was with me, and she said, well, this is everything. And I remember very instinctively thinking about what is everything and what is nothing. Because to me, it was nothing. But in other people's perspectives, it was everything. And I think that was my mantra for that year. And maybe the time I gave you that card, it was, the beginnings of that perspective is crazy powerful, and it defines the worlds that we live in. I like our world now.
I do too. Yeah. And during the time that you were living in New York, I was leading trips of continuing ed folks from Myatt to New York City for
scary
art tours. I would go to New York several times a year, but keep it contained to a long weekend.
The fact that you met my mom, you saw this thing, like you just sort of watched. And then I can see you hurting, and I give you a card, and that like cements something that's real. That means the world.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of my friends that have moved to New York and tried to settle there, it took them at least 5 years to make what they felt were deep enough connections to feel home-like. And I feel like I made those connections here in Milwaukee in a year or less. Like it felt home-like almost right away. I mean, for 7 years, I worked for a company in New York, but I would keep my apartment the poster company. And I would keep my apartment and my studio here because I could actually afford to have an apartment and a studio and then still have a quality of life and friends to come home to and family.
But it's those connections, and I don't take them for granted because it's not everybody. But so we both end up at UWM.
Yeah.
We're both working. And I don't remember how immediately our office spaces got shared, but I was so tickled that they did.
Well, the first year I was up in the weird little dusty loft on the 4th floor of Mitchell, but then the next year you and I moved into the group office together.
And then Maeve was born shortly after that, or several years.
Right, because that's where I babysat for Maeve. I was Maeve's first babysitter.
You were. You actually were her first and second babysitter. So you were her first babysitter in the office at a meeting.
When she cried the entire time. And you were like, if she cries, just rock her in the car seat.
She was young. She was like
real small. Yeah. And she cried the whole time, and there was a class going on in the next room. So I was like rocking vigorously. I was completely sweaty and red-faced when you came back. And she had just finally settled down after like 45 minutes of solid rocking. It was a great workout.
You also sang to her.
Yes. That's what ultimately got her
I could cry at this because I realized, and anyone who's a parent will understand, or a perfectionist, or all these things you could just use as adjectives to describe me. I wanted to do everything right, and I wanted to know like what time you're supposed to feed and how like you're tracking their poops. Like there's so much struggle. you were like, I sang to her.
That's
I don't
what
think
got
I
her
had
to calm
sung
down.
her. I mean, it seems
Yeah,
so...
you're like, I never thought of
It's so
that.
sad. It's so sad. I don't know what mom doesn't know how to sing to her kid, but I just didn't.
You were busy making like organic homemade baby food and
Like,
having everything be,
I mean,
that's why it takes a village, right, to raise
it
any
really
kid.
does. And then
Yeah.
the beauty of life and the humor is then when I like had Ferris and I would sing to him, I'm a bad singer, so I'm sure that's why I didn't sing. But while nursing Ferris, he would put his fist up to my mouth and shake his head like, "No, Mama, no."
Oh,
no.
Ferris, from early on, he knew what he liked and didn't like.
Yeah, well, you also weren't just like gently rocking me for 50 minutes. It was like in the car seat that weighed 50 pounds.
It was really heavy. Yeah.
Swinging and knocking your shoulder out of socket. So you did that.
Yeah, but it was the singing that did finally get her to calm down. She sort of looked at me like,
what is this noise?
What is this new thing?
But then I dropped her off here and you took her for a walk. And I think you guys said you ran into a neighbor with a stroller and a baby.
Baby that's the same age. Like they were almost exactly the same age. One of our neighbors and friends.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and you became Auntie JoJo and Aunt Kimmy, and it's cool to this day that you and Kim represent something so special to this generation, and they see same-sex marriages and they see healthy relationships because Ferris he's going to be marrying his best friend boy, and it's fine because that's how Kimmy and JoJo are.
Aww.
And so to Maeve, you're kind of like they don't know any other.
Yeah.
So if someone says, well, you can't do that, she is such a defender of like, yes, you can.
Maeve. 35. What about 35? Did things change?
Well, for me, yeah, you pointed out that that's when I was carrying Ferris, and I remember coming into the office so mad because my doctor said, well, this is a geriatric pregnancy. And I was blown away that would be geriatric. I still think that the doctor should make another interim name
term.
for it.
Yeah,
like
that sounds so
pre-geriatric.
I mean, a 35-year-old woman is in her prime. I think a 40-year-old woman is in her prime.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
Why the hell does the medical community and our world treat a 35 to 40-year-old woman like she's geriatric?
I don't know. And I didn't think I could have babies. Remember, I went through all of that trying to figure out fertility and issues along that. And so Ferris was just like both my kids, all kids, were just a miracle.
Yeah.
And I remember being so happy that I was carrying him. And I kind of talk like a sailor sometime, but I told the doctor off. And
I bet you did.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Good for me. But that was also the pregnancy that I developed diabetes, I think. So I think I tried to make a big change for the better. And Adam and I were moving out of our old house. God, that was stressful. And to be honest, if I think about when Ferris was born, I think about 35. It seems like I blink in my life and what I'm doing, because I feel like it's kind of this Trivia Pursuit puzzle piece. I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I the colleagues, in those relationships. I had the people that I went to school with that you're working to maintain. I'm an artist. I have a career. There's all these ways you can sort of divvy up your life. And then you add kids on top of it. And I just wasn't willing to give up anything else. Sort of like if you could take a geographical study of, are the diamonds? Is that what gets compressed under all that stuff?
Yes, it is.
Like maybe I'll make it myself into a diamond eventually.
I feel like at least outwardly, occasionally you've talked about the challenges and the weight of it, but mostly you express joy in most everything you do. So whatever's going on inside, you have a joyful exterior, which is impressive.
Yeah.
I think about when I was 35. 35 is when I started grad school. And I quit my job, moved from Miami to Madison, and started grad school. So I was like completely uprooting my life, which I was glad to do at that point, and leaving a kind of abusive relationship and starting grad school. And I had this idea that grad school was going to be my big treat to myself, just to focus on my work, So I was in a very different place at 35. I didn't have kids. I had a bird, but it definitely I was much more footloose and fancy free, but not, I didn't have a lot figured out. at 35. And I think grad school was much harder politically than I anticipated it would be. And, I made some really dear friends who have remained friends since then. But it was definitely a time where everything was changing. Like I had just sort of exploded my life. I think I didn't come out until I was 29. And I really do think that when people wait a long time to come out, it sort of delays a lot of the stages of development of your life because you're not being who you really are.
Yeah.
You're trying to be something else. And once you make that shift to committing to who you are, you go through the stages.
Yeah. It's kind of like there's an announcement of like, okay, no, this is who I am.
And now let's figure out who I am within that framework. Yeah. So when I got to MyEd, I was just 3 years beyond that.
And did you use the facilities to continue your art?
MyEd?
Yeah. Like the printing presses and everything?
Yeah. I started the Saturday morning open print studio in part because I wanted to be able to work, and I wanted friends of mine who also didn't have access to presses to be able to have access to it. And I had a studio space in the Fortress building at first, and then I bought my house that had the first floor living space and second floor studio.
Well, from what I remember seeing of you in MyEd and getting the mail and saying hi to you, you had all of your shit together, like all the time.
Isn't that funny? Huh?
Yeah, that's the perspective.
Yeah. I was excited to be myself. So I think I still didn't have a lot figured out, but I had more figured out than I had in the years prior.
So you at 35 and me at 35 was the exact same. We're figuring it out and just doing it. Making it look like we're doing it.
Just I wasn't pumping between breaks between classes in
you
my
had
office.
To sit through it. Wasn't there one time in the old office where I had turned it on and you were like, what's that noise?
It sounded like tiny little saws, like
was that the first time?
Yeah, I had never heard a breast pump before. I was like, what is that noise? It's so weird. And it was you. So you were sort of like hunched over at your desk.
I had to look at pictures to like get the milk flowing. I was trying to like drink mother's milk tea and eat almonds and like
I learned so much from both of you about pregnancy and
the
lactation
amazingness of the human body.
Yeah, it was really like these things that I sort of opted out of, and
I think I gained so much with Maeve. I was so happy. I think that's what's so beautiful about that time. I was so happy. And it was 3+ year struggle with fertility. And to me, the only way I know how to do things is by doing them. Fertility wasn't like that. When I finally got pregnant, I was so happy.
You had to reintroduce meat into your diet when you were
because that was part of my issues with infertility. I think I just wasn't eating the right things for my body, and it was all natural. It was great, and I taught right until and I was in the wood shop.
I was
kind
of impressed.
Yeah, and so all the little teenage boys who aren't little, they're college, 20-year-olds,
young men,
just staring at me, and I'm like, what? Why are you staring at me like this? Because in my mind, I was still like 29-year-old Katie, like walking around.
Any little thing.
And in hindsight, I realized that I was like a beluga whale whose belly could have hit the table saw blade.
Yeah.
Because I was so big. And then she came late and I was so sad because I had to go back to work. Like I had to put her into daycare at like 6 weeks or 8 weeks. That was tough.
That was the start of your intense logistics.
Yeah. Of every working mom.
Our department has been a really fun, kid-oriented department. I know some people that are like, no, kids are not allowed in anything in our program. And I'm like, no, ours is like, that's what makes it fun going to so many events and receptions is that all the kids we love are there and they get to know each other and they become kind of like cousins. And
I think that's what brings it back to the family thing. Yeah. These connections you make, and maybe it's you. Maybe you're like the tree, like putting all those roots out there, and the connections you have with me and everybody, it's just sort of known. It's like, this is our family. Be kind and be respectful. We're always going to be here for you.
In the queer community, there is a lot of talk about chosen family, and it's because so many people have been rejected by their blood family. So you form these other networks of family. And I think that Kim and I both came of age with that notion. I mean, I knew I was gay before I came out at 29. I knew all through my 20s, but it was a much tougher time to come out. The chosen family, I think, you just naturally begin to think of this broader network of people of who does it feel like you can have those deeper connections with. Who does it feel like you can serve the way that you would serve a family member in terms of support, and who can you trust and love and feel that in return? And I think that attitude has definitely guided our friendships, and our colleagues who you spend a great deal of time with. It's a natural extension.
I think about, like, the adjectives that I would use to think about you or the family. I like this idea of chosen family. I think the beautiful thing is, and you see people now, people are just constantly quitting and getting new jobs
every
and
2
moving.
years.
And I couldn't imagine that.
Me neither.
That's awesome. And maybe it's like that drive coming here. And it's been a while since I've been here, but there's like a comfort. And I do not take that feeling for granted.
It's a comfort and it's a commitment. Like
there
is you have to work through. I think a lot of people now who do change jobs every 2 years, maybe they've just had a really craptacular string of jobs, and it hasn't, there hasn't been an opportunity to create that sort of home-like community at any of their jobs. But I do think that there is a different attitude of not an expectation of commitment. You feel a commitment of the community to one another, even if it's not the employer, and you feel a commitment yourself to that community. And I do think that teaching, you have to be in it with your heart. You have to be in it with your heart, and otherwise you need to find a different job. Building those relationships with young people, mentoring them, I feel like that's a joyful act. Yeah. Even though sometimes it's really hard.
I do find at 44 that I can't find words for things. Maybe I need to do like Wordle or some sort of memory.
So
is your mind, are you losing
just
words?
So you know, that gets more intense as you move toward menopause, which I am now thankfully on the other side of.
Do the words come back after menopause?
No, but you find strategic ways of working with it. I mean, at first when I started to lose the words, I was like, oh no, maybe I've got early onset Alzheimer's
or dementia,
and I it was also at the time when my mother was experiencing early dementia. So I'm not early dementia, she was in her 80s, but I started freaking out. And then I read about how it was one of those things that comes with perimenopause, premenopause, and menopause, that language, particularly for some reason, names and nouns,
the fundamental building blocks.
But at first I was completely panicked about it. And then I just started to laugh at myself about it because it was absurd when I couldn't remember, that my first cousin's name.
I never noticed you having an issue with words.
Well, I didn't talk about it because I was freaked out about it.
Yeah.
Plus I was so overwhelmed with caring for my mom, and, really menopause was not fun to go through.
You were a diamond underground too.
That was a tough time.
But that's what I worry about, that it's all of that stress and all of that. Of course, women are going to get this because we go through menopause and we seem to deal with everything, like 50 million plates spinning while riding a unicycle.
Yeah.
We do so much, and it's like, and I'm not good with allocating or shifting responsibility. I worry that that's like the more stress you put on something, like things are going to slip out.
You do get more of a sense of humor about it because it is just like this new reality, like getting eyeglasses.
I am laughing a lot more, which is good.
You have to. It's a de-stressor. It's a total de-stressor.
When did you and Kim get married?
We got together in 2006. And we got married in 2008. So that's been 14 years. But I did have some time being single. It was during that time that Kim and I met. But she was in a relationship, so we were just became very fast friends. It was after that terrible breakup that got me into therapy, which was great for me. And I realized that a lot of why I was in therapy wasn't really about the breakup. It was about everything else that I hadn't really dealt with in my adult life. My therapist gave me an assignment to, I was already keeping a journal, and she gave me an assignment, which I love having assignments. And she had me write a list of everything I needed in a relationship, and then everything I wanted in a relationship, which was a separate list. I did that on a page, and at the bottom, I had just met Kim. We had just been getting to know each other, and I wrote, I need to meet someone like Kim, because I wasn't like, oh, she's taken, so I just need to meet someone like her.
Since you've been a thing in my world and everything life's presented you with, what have you learned to let go of? To let go of something is to realize it's not good, or you don't need it in your life. So what was the prompt that led to you letting go of something?
So talking about, the getting really anxious about the loss of words, trying to keep things the way that they were, like how my brain worked in my 30s versus how it works now. I feel like I have really been aware of working to let go of the anxiety about change that to me is not what I was hoping for. Even how your body changes as you get older, even like how my body has changed. Like I used to be really pretty physically fit for someone my age, but like my skin has changed. And, there's things like that I at first when that happened, when I went through menopause, I was like, ugh, what is this? And then I was like freaked out and trying to like lather my body with cream and, do all like,
Yeah.
but trying to keep things the way they were or get them back to the way that they were. And in fact, once I was like, you know what, this is my body. And this is a part of getting older. And I've got some gray hair and I've got some wrinkles and I've got, some skin that's like weird tissue papery, old lady skin. And I'm like, this is a part of getting older and this is me. And I've sort of let go of the anxiety of that and the fear of getting older and embraced the good parts of it. Like, I know a lot more now than I did when I was 35, right? I have a better sense of humor about things than I did. And that is like a superpower, right? To be able to laugh about things that once kept you up at night with fear or anxiety. And I kind of got excited when I finally got some gray hairs, because I was like, I just learned that you have to embrace it because it's beautiful in its own way. And I think our society doesn't allow for that necessarily, but
or doesn't have the discussion for it, but maybe it's too like you have the confidence in who you are now.
Right.
And the beauty that is you, because I know people can't see you, but you're fantastic. But I think maybe I can relate it to the confidence of being like a 200-pound pregnant woman. Like,
right.
It wasn't on my radar. Like, I was so happy. I had everything that I needed and this amazing body to do it with.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I do feel like letting go of some of the fear and embracing kind of the things can be really funny or just not that heavy. And I've started to get more sleep and not try to do everything.
I am deflated after almost every Herculean task because I've given so much out. But I think I'm learning, and I'm not there yet, so it's not like a learned past tense, but I'm learning that I have to create for myself strategies to let things go and to not keep piling it on. I do it at home. I'm not good at telling people what to do. I assume that they'll just see it. So what I'm learning is to create strategies for myself that allow me to either say no or be able to navigate all of these different terrains a little bit more gracefully. But I'm also acknowledging that I'm a doer and I have to do things. I'm letting go of the perfection that I put on myself at doing every single thing. So I no longer assume or expect myself to do things perfectly. I reflect on it and I acknowledge the failures of it. And instead of beating myself up over that, I kind of relish in them, like, yeah. And then the humor comes with it.
Right.
And it sort of knocks down my ego a little bit so that in a weird way, maybe I'm not going to jump to do everything. And it goes to a deeper issue with being a mom and trying to raise healthy kids in the world. I don't want to raise kids that are perfect. And I don't want to raise kids who think that perfection is a thing. And I don't want to go into art critique with students telling them they have to be perfect. I want to do all these things saying we're going to try the best we can. And this is where we can improve. But I'm trying to navigate it without giving myself more tasks. So
right. I mean, we talk so much in teaching art, how you learn so much from mistakes. And one of the things you learn from mistakes is how not to let it take you down completely, but how to like see it as an opportunity and have a sense of humor about it.
I'm learning to let go of holding myself to such a high bar.
We're retiring at the end of next year. And,
so awesome.
Like there's a lot of question marks of what that's going to look like, what our lives will be like. Hopefully we'll still come to some events. We need to like start to gear down now a little bit so that it's not such a sudden drop off.
The other idea is, what have you learned to embrace? And you're embracing yourself. And I'm trying to embrace the mistakes. I like that word mistake, and say that to my students all the time. Like, let's like find the mistakes. And I think there's great joy and humor in that too.
Yeah.
Like seeing that.
And also what you think of as a mistake, someone else might say, I really like that part.
Right.
Well,
Well, and it's a mistake that comes after so much freaking work.
Mistakes are just an opportunity to do things differently. And they're kind of also just oftentimes what we see as a mistake. It didn't turn out the way we intended, but it turned out.
I think what I'm trying to learn and struggling to do is to still have those moments of like, all right, what did I mess up? Maybe that comes with age.
Thank you for your presence here with us today. We invite you to keep coming back and to weave your story into legacy. Subscribe now and visit INTERWOVN.com to sign up for our newsletter and to access more resources. This podcast copyright is June of 2022. We want to thank our sponsors and affiliates, as well as our producers, Teresa Kopak, Rebecca Jankowski, and Jen Gilmore of Sound Fort Studios. All original music was created and performed by Gina Barrington. A special thanks to Josie and Katie for sharing their stories with us.